There was a woman named Ruth who had reached a season in her life where she felt like she had already used up all her strength. She was not old, but she felt worn down in a way that made every morning feel heavier than it should have. She had once believed that life would move more smoothly. She thought she would have more answers by now, more peace by now, more stability by now. Instead, she found herself standing in the middle of uncertainty, trying to hold together the pieces of life that had not gone the way she expected. Ruth had gone through many things. Some were loud and dramatic, but most were quiet and painful in a way that wears a person down slowly. She had experienced loss. She had faced disappointment. She had watched some doors close when she hoped they would open. She had prayed for help and sometimes felt as if the answer was taking too long. She had done her best to stay faithful, but even faith can feel tired when the road keeps stretching and no end seems near. For a while, Ruth began to think that maybe her journey had already reached its final shape. She thought perhaps the good chapters were behind her, and what remained was only endurance. She did not say this out loud very often, but it lived in her mind. She woke up each day with a strange heaviness. She handled her responsibilities. She took care of her family. She did what needed to be done. But inside, she had started to believe that her best days were behind her. The pain of the past had started speaking too loudly to her future. That kind of thinking can quietly steal hope. It does not always come with a sudden crash. Sometimes it enters gently, through tired thoughts and repeated disappointment. A person starts to believe that what has happened so far is all there is. They begin to call a difficult season the whole story. That is what had happened to Ruth. She had stopped expecting new light because she had been standing too long in the shadow of old pain. One evening, after a long day, Ruth sat alone near her window while the house was quiet. The sky outside had gone dark, and the stillness around her seemed to reflect the stillness she felt inside. She looked at her hands and thought about everything she had carried. The weight of responsibility, the weight of memory, the weight of worry, the weight of wondering whether change was still possible. She had prayed many times for direction, and now she felt as if all she could do was sit quietly and breathe. That was when a calm thought settled in her heart. Your journey is not over. It was simple, but it carried a deep peace. It did not solve everything instantly, but it interrupted the lies she had been telling herself. The thought came like a gentle reminder that what she had been walking through was only one part of the road. It was not the end. It was not the final page. It was not the full picture. She sat still and let that truth sink in. She had been living as if the story had ended because it was hard. But hard seasons are not the same as final seasons. The next morning, Ruth woke up with the same responsibilities, but something inside her had changed. The problems had not vanished. The bills were still there. The pressures were still there. The unanswered questions were still there, but she no longer looked at them the same way. She began to understand that a difficult season can be real without being final. She saw that just because a chapter is painful does not mean the book is finished. This gave her a little more courage to move forward. She started paying attention to the small things in her life that she had overlooked. She noticed that she still had breath. She still had ability. She still had people who needed her. She still had a mind that could learn, a heart that could heal, and a future that had not yet been fully written. She realized that as long as there was life in her, there was still a road ahead. That was a very important truth. People often think their journey ends when they lose a season, a dream, or a comfort. But life keeps moving, and so does God's work in person. Ruth began to take smaller steps instead of trying to solve everything at once. She had spent too long staring at the whole mountain and feeling overwhelmed. Now she focused on one day at a time. She made the bed. She cooked the meal. She answered the message. She took the walk. She prayed. She did not wait to feel perfect before moving. She moved with the strength she had. That was enough to begin. As days passed, she noticed that small acts of faith were changing the atmosphere in her heart. When she stopped telling herself the journey was over, she began to notice signs of life again. A little more peace in the morning, a little more patience with others, a little more clarity in her thinking, a little less fear when problems appeared. These were not dramatic miracles, but they were evidence that something inside her was waking up again. She also realized that the journey she had been on had not only taken from her, it had also taught her. The hard years had taught her compassion. The waiting had taught her patience. The losses had taught her humility. The disappointments had taught her that human plans can change, but purpose can remain steady. She began to see that every season, even the painful ones, leave something behind. Some leave wounds, some leave wisdom, some leave both. Ruth could now see that her journey had given her strength she would not have had otherwise. This changed how she viewed her past. She had once thought that every difficult moment was a sign that something was wrong with her path. Now she understood that not every hard road is a wrong road. Sometimes the road is hard because it is shaping you. Sometimes the road is long because it is teaching you how to endure. Sometimes the road is lonely because it is showing you that your identity cannot rest in people alone. She no longer wanted to erase the hard parts. She wanted to understand what they had built in her. She also noticed that the people around her began to see a difference. Her children saw that she was calmer. Her friends noticed that she spoke with more hope. Her family saw that she no longer carried the same defeated expression. They did not know all the reasons for the change, but they could feel it. When a person begins to believe again, it often shows in the way they carry themselves. Hope changes posture. Hope changes tone. Hope changes the pace of a home. Ruth had once lived as if she had no more room to grow. Now she began to see that growth never really stops. A person may be bruised, but they can still become stronger. A person may be delayed, but they can still move forward. A person may be tired, but they can still take another step. This became one of the main lessons of her journey. The road is not over simply because the current stretch is hard. One afternoon, she found an old notebook where she had written prayers from years earlier. Some were desperate, some were hopeful, some were full of questions. She read them slowly and saw that many of them had been answered in ways she had not expected. Some answers had come through a change in her heart. Some had come through protection. Some had come through closed doors that kept her from greater harm. Some had come through people who showed up at the right time. She realized that God had been moving through her journey in ways she often only noticed later. That brought her comfort. She had spent too much time thinking her story was unfinished, because one part of it was still painful. But now she saw that the journey had already been carrying her somewhere meaningful. The point was not only the destination. The point was also what she was becoming along the way. She was becoming calmer, wiser, and more aware. She was becoming someone who could stand in hard seasons without losing her center. She was becoming someone who could help others who felt the same way she once felt. That was when the story changed again. Ruth began to see other people more clearly. She noticed how many were also tired. Some looked successful on the outside, but carried quiet disappointment. Others seemed busy, but their eyes told another story. Some had given up on their dreams because they thought they were too late. Others had stopped trusting because they had been hurt one too many times. Ruth felt compassion for them because she knew what it meant to think the journey was nearly over when it was only paused. She started speaking more gently to those around her, not in long speeches, not in perfect words, but in simple truth. She reminded people that a hard season does not end the road. She encouraged them not to label themselves by one painful chapter. She told them that life can still open in surprising ways. She believed that because she had begun to experience it herself, the journey that once felt narrow was slowly widening again. There was still resistance in her heart sometimes. On some morning she woke up and the old thoughts tried to return. They said it was too late, that too much had been lost, that too many things had gone wrong. But now she knew how to answer those thoughts. She would look at the day ahead and tell herself that the journey is still alive. She would remind herself that one delay does not cancel a calling. One failure does not finish a future. One season does not define the whole road. This became her inner practice. She did not let the voice of defeat speak unchallenged. She answered it with truth. That truth was not loud, but it was steady. It said there is still breath in your body. There is still purpose in your days. There is still room for growth. There is still room for restoration. There is still room for joy. There is still room for new beginnings, even if they come after deep pain. As Ruth kept walking, she noticed something important about herself. She had become less afraid of uncertainty. She still wanted answers, of course. She still wanted peace and direction, but she was no longer requiring complete certainty before taking the next step. That was a huge change. She had learned that life often reveals itself one step at a time. If a person waits to see the entire road before moving, they may never begin. But if they trust that the next step is enough, the path often unfolds in a way they could not have predicted. This was how her journey continued. One day at a time, one prayer at a time, one lesson at a time, one act of trust at a time. She began to sleep better. She became less anxious. She no longer replayed every regret in the same way. She understood now that regret can teach, but it should not imprison. The past could guide her, but it did not have to own her. The future was still open. That understanding brought a gentle kind of freedom. She felt the weight of what if begin to loosen. There was one particular evening when she stood outside for a few minutes after the sun had set. The air was cool and the sky had a quiet beauty. She looked up and felt something inside her soften her. The stars were distant, but they were still there. They reminded her that even when things are dark, light is not gone. It may be far away, but it exists. The journey, too, can feel dark while still moving toward light. That thought stayed with her. It helped her understand that she was not walking in circles. She was still moving forward. Not quickly, not perfectly, but forward. That mattered. As the months passed, a new rhythm formed in her life. She was still responsible, still busy, still carrying some of the same challenges, but the burden no longer felt like a final sentence. It felt like a passage. She knew there would be more days of testing. She knew there would be moments when fear would try to return. But she also knew that she was no longer the same woman who believed her story was almost finished. She had learned how to endure without surrendering her hope. One of the quietest and most powerful changes in Ruth was that she stopped measuring her life only by visible results. Before, if she could not see progress, she assumed nothing was happening. Now, she understood that some of the most important work happens in hidden places. Healing is hidden before it is visible. Strength is hidden before it is expressed. Wisdom is hidden before it becomes obvious. She had been asking for visible proof of movement, but God had been working in invisible ways all along. That realization made her more grateful for the hidden season, the waiting season, the quiet season, the difficult season. She no longer saw them as interruptions. She saw them as preparation. Her journey had been building something in her that she could not have received any other way. It had built resilience. It had built depth. It had built faith. She also learned to celebrate small victories. A peaceful morning, a kind conversation, a burden lifted a little, a door opening in a quiet way, a thought that no longer brought panic. These small victories reminded her that the story was still in motion. Many people miss their growth because they only celebrate the big moments. But small moments matter because they reveal the direction of a life. Ruth began honoring the small signs of progress, and that helped her stay encouraged. The more she practiced this, the more her heart changed. She stopped saying, "I'm still stuck," and started saying, "I'm still becoming." That was a major shift. Stuck sounds final. Becoming sounds alive. Becoming means there is still movement, still development, still purpose unfolding. Ruth realized that her journey had not ended because it had slowed. It was simply continuing in a way she did not expect. That is often true for people in hard seasons. They think the delay means the path has ended. But delay is not death. Silence is not the finish. Waiting is not the end. The journey can feel paused while still being active beneath the surface. That was the message Ruth carried now. She would not let pain define the final picture. She would not let disappointment become the name of her whole life. Her family noticed that she had become a source of strength for them. Her children came to her with more trust because she listened without panic. Her friends noticed that she had a gentler confidence. She had become someone who had suffered, learned, and remained open to life. That kind of person is rare. They do not deny pain, but they refuse to let pain have the final say. One of the most important things Ruth learned was that a journey is not over until God says it is over. Human disappointment is not the final marker. A tired heart is not the final marker. A closed door is not the final marker. The journey continues because God is still at work. This gave her the courage to keep walking even when she did not know the next exact turn. She began to think of life like a long road with many turns and seasons. Some parts are smooth, some are steep, some are dark, some are bright, some are lonely, some are full of company. But the road is still the road. The fact that one section is hard does not mean the traveler should stop forever. It simply means they must keep moving with wisdom and faith. Ruth understood this now. The old version of her had wanted a quick rescue. The new version of her had learned steady trust. That did not mean she enjoyed suffering. It meant she had learned to live with courage inside it. That is often the difference between breaking and growing. The same pain can do both. It can break a person who believes the journey is over, or it can grow a person who believes there is still more ahead. Ruth chose growth. Years later, when she looked back, she would see that the season she thought was ending was actually opening. The road that felt closed was actually carrying her into a deeper life. She would understand that the tears had not been wasted. The prayers had not been wasted. The waiting had not been wasted. The silence had not been wasted. They had all been part of the path that led her to a stronger, more peaceful self. And that is the guidance in her story. Do not call your journey finished because you are tired. Do not call your journey finished because you are wounded. Do not call your journey finished because one chapter was hard. Do not call your journey finished because the answer came slowly. Keep walking. Keep trusting. Keep becoming. Your journey is not over. There is still breath in your lungs, still purpose in your days, still hope in your heart, and still a future ahead that may surprise you. What looks like a pause may only be a turning point. What looks like the end may only be the middle. What feels heavy now may one day become the very thing that made you strong enough to carry more. Ruth learned that truth slowly, but deeply. She learned that life can still open after sorrow. She learned that peace can return after pressure. She learned that purpose can continue after disappointment. She learned that God is not finished with life just because it's been hard. So if you need a sign, let this be it. Your journey is not over. There is more to come. There is more to heal. There is more to build. There is more to see. There is more to become. Keep going. Your story is still unfolding.